This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Welcome to the Telescope View with the author of The Final Revelation the Sun Project, Rick Teles, and of course our favorite Martian, Steve Parker, and yours truly, Larry Mangello. And before we talk about the subject of tonight's show, we had a viewer request some more information, Steve, or Rick, about what your background was.
Okay, I mean, what really got me started on the book, but basically I hold master's degrees in software engineering and education. All right, so I have a little bit of a technical background. And I've been a UFO investigator and researcher for almost 50 years now, which, you know, I started when I was like 2 years old. But probably more importantly, how I got to the book and I was able to write the book is that I work for the U.S. government and the aerospace industry in the cybersecurity field. So, you know, we've heard of cyber warfare, cybersecurity. It's on the news everywhere, maybe not enough. So I did a lot of that work. And in doing that, I met a number of people. Actually, one was a friend of mine that I'd known for years anyway, in both the military and the intelligence communities, who were willing to share some information with me about what they had learned about what the government knows about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And it was kind of an eye-opening experience because even though, you know, I like to believe in this stuff for all those years, when they actually started talking, people with this level of involvement in the government and intelligence, it was kind of eye-opening.
Well, interesting enough, Rick, tonight's show is going to be about a program called ATIP. The question I have for you, is this the tip of the iceberg?
ATIP is actually the tip of the iceberg when it gets to UFO investigation.
Now this is AATIP?
AATIP, Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And it was in December of last year that the Pentagon finally came out and admitted that this program did exist. Now, according to them, it ran from 2007 to 2012, which is, you know, probably true. And this was what we called a second level, a really second level investigation type of project. ATIP was actually run by what we call a MAGIC committee, and some people are out there going to say, oh, MAGIC, we've heard of that before. Well, don't get too excited about MAGIC because there's hundreds of these committees. It stands for Multi-Agency Joint Intelligence Committee, so that's all the different groups, and they would work for them. So I guess we were a little more surprised. A lot of us knew that ATIP existed. We were kind of surprised that finally the Pentagon and the government came out and said it did exist.
So they admitted it.
Yeah, and the purpose of ATIP is to investigate what is known as UFOs, unidentified flying objects, as well as probably unidentified submerged objects. But again, we have to, you know, to level set here and to be fair, a large part of this, of course, was aimed at unidentified objects that might be Russian technology or Chinese technology, because in today's world, everybody's got something flying around in the sky out there.
So in reality, we're, you know, unidentified object could mean a lot of things.
It could mean a lot of different things. It doesn't have to mean it's extraterrestrial. But what they haven't talked about is that there was a very secret portion of ATIP that did deal with unidentified flying aircraft objects that might be of extraterrestrial origin.
Now, they don't know. Do they let? You said they let it out. Is that because it's not there anymore, or why would they be willing to talk about it when they weren't for so many years?
Well, because there is a new project out there. There is something new, and like I said, ATIP was what we call a level 2 investigation. Level 1 is going to be when, let's say the Air Force, let's say a pilot's out there and they see something. Level 1 is they're going to come back and they're going to report, I saw something unusual. Of course, we're probably going to be talking about it on the radio. And one of the big things, of course, when ATIP came out and they talked about this at about the same time, or they went back and they said, in 2008, yes, we did this infamous Tic Tac video came out about two Navy pilots who watched these things fly across the sky in front of them at ridiculous speeds, and they were getting all excited. We have our little kind of Tic Tac elliptical shape floating here. This is what they said. But when I say it's level 2, level 1 is going to be the general military, let's say, they're going to see something. They're not going to know. They're going to report it up through the chain. It's going to eventually get to their intelligence group, probably base intelligence. Base intelligence is going to take a look at this and they're going to say, all right, it's this or it's this, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it from here. Base intelligence now is going to be like the first level. Now they're going to say, wait a minute, this is a little beyond us, we're concerned about this, and again, it could be something terrestrial, but we're concerned about it. They're not going to report it to the Pentagon, now it's going to go to ATIP, okay? ATIP's going to look at it. Now ATIP's going to say, it might be terrestrial, it might be this or that. Now if ATIP says, we don't know what this is, it moves up to the next level. Okay. Now,
next level is kind of a real secretive thing, right?
The next level is the most secret. A handful of people know about it. The problem that we had was you had Project Blue Book in the beginning. And Project Blue Book, it was just a superficial attempt really to allay the concerns or to respond to the public. Even though there was a very secret side to Blue Book, which probably was the precursor to like an ATIP. Well, what's going to happen is it's going to go up, and there's a group out there, and it is really super secret, okay? And there's a handful of people that really know about this. It is classified top secret at the highest levels, SCI, which we call special compartmented information, or secure compartmented information, or sensitive compartmented information. They call them, whatever you're going to hear. And according to what I was told, the reports are the name or the code for this is now Archangel. And Archangel is the most secret of the secret. And Archangel deals only with what they might think is non-terrestrial craft.
But how do you know this? It's secret, only a handful of people know, but you know about it, so you're part of this handful.
Well, I guess I am now, but I knew some of the people who were part of the handful. Okay. So some of those people that I spoke to, like one guy was a member of what they called J2, which was the information or the intelligence directorate for the Joint Chiefs. All right, and he said, this is the stuff. Now, when we mention Archangel, I don't know that it's ever been mentioned before, so we're pushing the envelope a little bit here, but I heard some people talking about something similar the other day, so I figured, what the heck.
Now, you kind of confused me a little. You talked about being non-extraterrestrial.
Non-terrestrial, which means it's extraterrestrial.
Okay.
Okay. They don't like to talk in those terms, because you talk in the terms of extraterrestrial, you just mention something. When you hear about NASA talking about finding complex organics on a planet or on a moon, that's life.
That's life.
So instead of saying life, they say complex organics because they don't want to say life.
Some of that in my neighborhood.
So outcomes. So now they create this group that supposedly is called Archangel. Now they have two responsibilities, probably more, that I understand. One is to investigate these things that now these military professionals can't explain what it is. The second is their job to manage any information about this that gets out into the public. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to deal with it? So their job is to keep everything under control. And I was once told that the government doesn't care so much what information is given out in terms of this topic or some topics, as long as there's no evidence to support it. So the Archangel people are out there keeping track of what information is going on. Now, the interesting thing about in doing this is now they will pose as journalists, they will pose as engineers, doctors, or any other occupation that might allow them to keep track of this information.
Are we talking about private companies?
Well, we're going to talk about private companies. At this point, we're talking about people that, who knows who they work for. But we have a lot of UFO groups out there. And the information I'm giving is some of these people are actually working for those UFO groups. So all the while they're kind of
They have regular jobs.
While they're pushing the UFO group, on the other hand, they're reporting back and controlling what information is really being dealt with.
So my eye doctor could be part of this organization.
Could be, but I don't really think that's going to be the case. So we have this code now called Archangel, or this group called codenamed Archangel, which is really what we call a control group or a control system where there's other stuff underneath it, but Archangel is going to be the name of it. The thing about Archangel and some of the stuff that's going on is, I like to say it's kind of like, because everybody understands it, it's kind of like the Harvey Weinstein scandal. People within the industry knew it was going on, but they never said anything. And if you talk to a number of people, particularly in the intelligence community, they probably heard something about this. Now, maybe they didn't hear the name Archangel, but they've heard that this goes on, and basically their job is, when you're in the military, you do your job and you forget about the rest of it, and somebody else is taking care of it, you hand it off. Now, Larry mentioned something about private corporations.
Yeah, that kind of interests me.
Yeah. Part of doing investigations, and it can be for UFOs, it can be for other stuff, is to create private corporations as a front for intelligence gathering or for investigations. So you can have a private, or what appears to be a private corporation out there, and they're going to do some real work, but they're also going to be doing investigations. And these are known as they've been called swine projects. You can look that up. I don't like that name so much. Or carve-out projects. They've been carved out of a government operation to be done separately as a private corporation. Now, what's one of the benefits of doing this through a private corporation?
We certainly know that.
Well, private corporations are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act.
Absolutely not. That's right.
So if you're working for one of these, let's say I know somebody who worked for one of these, and somebody comes to you and says, what is it that you're working on? Well, we really can't talk about that. Well, we're going to file a Freedom of Information request. Go ahead. FOIA does not apply to a private corporation. So this is a way to gather that information. Now, I was also told something else interesting about all this, which was, well, wait a minute, they're also doing real work. They're working for new municipalities, yes. They're working for companies, and we're getting paid for this, right? Yes, where does that money go? Well, that funds the black budget.
Mm-hmm. What?
Funds the black budget.
The black budget.
So it comes from these private corporations. They exist. You can kind of look this up. You can find some information. And of course, you know, the first thing people say is if they don't like it or they don't know anything about it, gee, it must be conspiracy theory. It might be fake news. Okay, believe what you want. It still goes on. You can believe that the recent Facebook breach just happened, but it's been going on for 3 years, and they didn't tell anybody about it. You don't have to believe that, but it's true. Okay, this is what's going on. So what we have here, what we're talking about, is this thing called Archangel, which is kind of the follow-on to the AATIP. But Archangel gets far more into this stuff that most of us would not believe on the outset that even exists. That the government does know about extraterrestrial life, and they do have investigations. Now, the interesting thing about this is we also have the CIA, who for many years said we were never involved in this, which in fact, information was disclosed a couple of years ago that shows up through 1978 and even the 80s, they were actively investigating unidentified flying objects. And in just 2016, just a couple of years ago, the United Nations requested more information. They have a group that follows unidentified flying objects and what they might be or what the issue might be. Now, again, a big piece of this is going to be, are different countries overflying other people's airspace with stuff they should not be? Well, that could be going on, but in the United States, it's kind of unlikely that that's going to happen, and we're not going to know about it. All right, so that type of stuff is going on.
Now, what are the chances that when you get into all this stuff that, you know, only a handful of people know and everything else, are these organizations that perhaps don't even report to our top government people? Are there people that say, okay, well, he's our president, but he's only going to be in there a few years?
Well, you know what?
That's another subject.
That's a good question, because actually now, what I was told, who owns Archangel, they didn't know.
Okay.
So who does Archangel belong to? We don't know. What super secret group, and there's hundreds of them out there that do different things. We don't know. Now, as far as the presidents are concerned, that was interesting because I actually witnessed this one time. What was explained to me is that not all the presidents would know any of this information, and a lot of the legislators, senators, they're not going to know this information. Why? Well, because they're considered transients.
Right.
They may never have to deal with this topic in their lifetime, or in their tenure. So why tell them?
That's right.
I witnessed one time a high-ranking military officer lecture a senator about this very issue. Apparently, they had been in some kind of hearing, and this senator said something he shouldn't have said. And apparently, he didn't really know the story.
Wow.
We got outside. I'm standing with this guy, very, very high-ranking officer. You don't get much higher. And he looked at the senator and pointed to him right in the eyes, and he said, "You should not be talking about that. That is not information you should be disclosing." And the senator goes, "I'm on the intelligence." And this guy laid into him, and he said, "I don't care what committee you're on. You know only what we tell you, and we don't tell you everything because you can't be trusted." And he said it right there. I mean, for somebody to say this to a senator, and he goes, "What's he going to do to me?" I mean, this guy was a lifer. I mean, he's done, his job was to protect his country for his life. Nobody was going to toss him out. Nobody's going to say 2 words to him. So, I mean, and you can kind of see that, all right? There's some of this stuff, and we've been through this before. People are going to say, it's a conspiracy theory within the government to withhold this information. All right, maybe some areas of the government, but when it comes to the military and some of the intelligence groups, and we talked about this once before, they take an oath that they are going to defend the Constitution and the citizens of the United States from all threats, foreign and domestic.
That's right.
Okay? If they're told that this information is secret because it's national security and the defense of our nation depends on it, they're going to keep their mouths shut. They don't care what you say about them or what you call them. That's their job, and that's what you want them to do. So we need to back off of them a little bit. I know there's some authors out there that, the conspiracy theory, and they attack the military. Give these people a break. They're just trying to do their jobs and protect us. I mean, I'm sure there's others that are trying to hide things, but that's the way it works.
I mean, you're talking national security in some cases, and it's very important. Absolutely.
Well, it is. And some of this information, now we know, and we learned after World War II through Operation Paperclip and some of the others, that there was information, that the Nazis did collect information about unidentified flying objects, so on and so forth. We know that the Soviets and the Russians probably got some of the same information we have. I've had questions before, if all this technology exists and we know something about it, why don't we use it? Because we don't know how to use it. We don't still understand the technology. According to these people, since the late 40s, we've had some type of communication with some type of intelligence, but they won't tell us the secrets of how this works. They'll tell you a concept and that something exists, but they're not going to tell us anything. So am I going to take a chance of going out and say to somebody, we got this technology, but we haven't figured it out yet? Every intelligence agency in the world now is going to be trying to hunt down that piece of information and get it. And what if one gets it and they figure it out and we don't? We're in deep trouble. So it's best to say, we don't know anything about it. It doesn't exist.
Rick,
hide in plain sight.
Rick, excuse me, but I know you fly over some of these things sometimes, no pun intended, but you mentioned, and I know we've talked about it before, Operation Paperclip. But for the people that are just tuning in now and maybe seeing the show for the first time, can you just give us a quick thumbnail sketch as to what Operation Paperclip was? Operation
Paperclip was after World War II. We tried to gather up all the Nazi scientists, rocket scientists, medical people, and bring them over here. And then, of course, we took all their files, any files we could get our hands on, any documentation that we brought it here so that we could then study it. Operation Paperclip probably led to the space program. Werner von Braun was one of the people that came over in Operation Paperclip. He helped develop our space program and some of the rockets that we had. So that's what Operation Paperclip was.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
What's an interesting subject is how he got some of this technology. There's a lot of question there. How did he get some of this?
Well, there's an interesting story to that, and I've heard it told, and some people say, that's fake news, that's this, and I've heard people say, no, we actually know that was true. He was asked one time, how did you get this done? You were having problems. In Germany, you were having problems with these rockets. You got here, you still had problems. How did you all of a sudden fix it? And he said, we had help from them. And people said, who are them? And he would say, them. And this is Werner von Braun. That's all he would say. I mean, you add that to the same comments made by Ben Rich, who was the protege of Kelly Johnson, who had the Lockheed Skunk Works, U-2, SR-71. He said the same thing. He said that on his deathbed. So, who knows? I mean, I know what these men told me, and we wrote about that. And they basically said, for the record, extraterrestrial life exists. The U.S. government knows about it. It's been here, and it remains here, and there's been limited communications with it. That's it. That's what they said. When they said that, I've said this many times, I'm sitting there and I got that sinking feeling like when you get bad news from somebody, it's like, wait a minute, you guys are joking with me. No, they're not. Now, saying that in 1980, 1989, 1990, yeah, that may sound funny.
That's
Based
right.
on today's technology, it's not so far-fetched anymore because we're doing some of the same stuff.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah. Now it starts to make a lot of sense. That's right.
You know, this Tic Tac.
Our Tic Tac UFO there?
Yeah, I'm a little interested about that thing. I remember that event. That was just unbelievable.
What was the event?
Well, the fighter pilots has got this UFO sighting, and they were jumping out of their pants.
Now, some
I
people-
mean, these are common and cool and collective
Combat
people.
Navy.
And they thought the Tic Tacs were flying
Well,
around.
these are two younger things. Now, some people are saying, oh, they don't know if that was real, but the Pentagon is the one who kind of put it out there. But you don't hear these guys, you don't hear any pilot ever panic. They are so smooth. Yeah, we see bogey coming in at 3 o'clock. Okay, we're gonna take 13 degrees out here and Angels 5, and we're out of here. These guys were getting excited, and they were getting excited because how fast these things were moving. Yeah, you know, a fighter pilot, they want a plane like that can move that fast. But they were saying those things are moving at 3,000 miles an hour, then they're stopping, and then the other pilot, his wingman is saying, wait a minute, there's 4 more or 5 more over here behind it. What is this thing? Now, I need to know what that is, and as a fighter pilot, I need to know what that is because that could be a threat to me.
Yeah, sure.
They didn't. So what got me about that is if everything there is on the up and up with that video was not so much the video itself, which was pretty impressive, was that these pilots got excited. And they
Oh yeah,
never
when
get
you hear
excited.
the sound, I mean, they were jumping out of their pants. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Look at that. What is that? I mean, it was just beyond belief.
They were using words that typically they're not going to use. I mean, yeah, fighter pilots are going to say almost anything, but you know, they broke a little bit of protocol on there. But there are, you know what, I like to say, you know, people say this is all impossible. Everything is impossible until it isn't.
Until it isn't.
Television was impossible until it wasn't. Okay, stealth was impossible until it wasn't. Anesthesia was impossible until it wasn't. Einstein had that whole theory of gravitational waves. That's impossible until it wasn't. And the interesting thing about stuff like that is the concept of gravitational waves, which NASA now has conceded exist, and that they found them, is it doesn't fit in Newton's theory of gravity. Newton said gravity was a field, not a wave. Well, now we know it's a wave.
Now it's a wave.
And then, you know, I think we talked about this the other day, that NASA's been doing a project in Antarctica, and they've been tracking particles. All right, and I forgot the name of the project. It was the Alice project. I don't remember what the acronym stands for. But what they discovered was that neutrinos were actually coming out of the Earth. That's impossible.
Yeah, it's not
neutrinos are
supposed to
particles
happen.
that travel at the speed of light, and they come from other places, not from the Earth. They can go through material, but they can't go all the way through the Earth. It doesn't matter whether we understand neutrinos or what kind of particles they are. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they were coming out of the Earth. And what that means is that we have a thing that we've lived by for years. Physicists have lived by. It's called the basic physics model, BPM. If, in fact, the neutrinos were coming out of the Earth, which they kind of proved did, the basic physics model is partially wrong. So what we're learning here is the science that we've been taught, particularly about extraterrestrial or exoscience, is not correct. So if you start from the wrong basis, then what's out there you can't possibly know. So you can't say what isn't. So you can't say life is impossible, even though we know we're finding life. You can't say that any of this now is impossible. It's all very possible. Hey, we can't predict the weather 3 days in a row. How can we say what's going on in the core of the universe, which we don't even know where that core is at this point. So that's what we're getting to here. So when people look at this and say, well, all this is impossible, my first question is to, why do you say that? What is that based on? And eventually they're going to get back to kind of that's what we were taught. Well, we were taught the wrong things. We were taught that there was no life in our solar system. There is. We found it. We were taught that the planets, most of the planets were dead, rocky, orbs. Well, they're not all rocks. They're gas giants, and they're not dead. So my point here is that we need to look at things differently. We need to look at it in terms of science of the 21st century. And all of a sudden, this science is saying this is all very, very possible.
And it's making a sense. That's the most important thing.
And it's making sense today. I haven't met anyone yet, be it physics professor from UConn or someone else who can look at me and say, you're absolutely wrong, because they can no longer say they're absolutely right.
Do they teach, like a lot of things you're talking about, do they teach in college, you know, to start questioning things and look, I mean, or is it all just considered too far out there?
They are starting to teach this in college. There's a lot of people starting to say, we have to question this. But the thing is, if our mathematics and our science can't define it, then it's not reality. But we've also learned that some of the basis of our mathematics are wrong. And we're starting to learn this. So if you start with the wrong, or if you start, everything that you do is based on your starting point, your perspective. If you start with the wrong perspective, then you can't get to the right answer. So all this has now become more possible. And just about everybody I've spoken to, after we talk for a while, and they learn I'm not completely crazy, and I'm trying to present this
Not completely.
with parallels to our science, they're starting to say it makes sense.
It makes sense, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, Rick, this subject is just fascinating to me. And
You should see the guy at a party. It's amazing.
As usual, time is flying, and we're going to have to say good night for tonight. But I want to remind everybody, so please email us at theviewshow@aol.com. And we hope to be doing some new things in the future. We might even have an audience that we're going to be talking to live very soon. And thank you and good night.